Hey there, I hope you're doing good. I'm Leo and welcome to this channel I created to assist students and young professionals in advancing their supply chain careers. Today I wanted to discuss certification exams and how to pass them successfully. In this video, I'll be sharing 3 tips to help you pass your first certification exam with the best possible grade. I wanted to begin with something obvious, but a tip that is often overlooked, and I wanted to conclude with a more surprising tip that you may find unexpected because I'll be revealing something about certification exams that I feel like very few people talk about. So yeah, a supply chain certification, first of all, I think is really important to develop your career because it gives you access to job opportunities and the best supply chain career positions. And I think today recruiters are always looking for certifications in your CV and even on your LinkedIn profile. So if you haven't earned a supply chain certification yet, that's definitely something I recommend you to do. I know I personally did the ISCA CSCA, which is pretty good because this certification is globally recognized and also has no prerequisites, so it's a great way to kickstart your journey in supply chain management and start somewhere. Let's dive into the certification exam. So taking a certification exam can be a very stressful experience. Personally, for me, it was, because even though you might have gone through the course and you might even feel comfortable with the topics that are evaluated, the thing with the exam is that there's a time limit to complete the exam, and personally, that puts a lot of pressure on me. So time can really become your enemy in those situations because the ticking clock can become a nightmare if you don't manage it properly. I think the best way is really just to prepare it. So the first tip I'm going to give you, which might seem obvious, is to read carefully every question, because I made so many mistakes sometimes on exams because when we read in normal condition, it really isn't a problem, but when we are under stress, we tend to read too fast and we overlook just a couple of words in a sentence. 1 or 2 words can potentially change the understanding of really what's being asked. For example, I had something where I've been asked if one action is the best way to improve performance in a particular scenario, and the question was actually asked differently. So it was basically prompting me to consider if the action is not the best way to improve the performance. So if I missed that single word, not, I would have answered the question incorrectly in the first way around. That's what I did. The second tip I'll give you is about the options you'll be given to answer. Okay, let me explain myself. Most certification exams have multiple choice questions from which, you're required to pick an answer. And I've realized that, it's a common thing to want to select, the first answer that seems correct to you and move on, quickly because there's a time limit. I've come to realize that that's really a mistake. Some questions are really designed so that all the options may seem correct, and you'll need to choose just the best answer. And so if you read all the options and consider all of them before making your selection, then that's a good thing. And finally, the last tip, which I find very good to reduce stress, is based on the certification exam and the way it's made. And that's the percentage of questions that are actually difficult. Okay, let me explain. Designing an exam where all the questions are, equally difficult is something that is more or less impossible. In reality, some of the questions are very difficult and a lot of the questions are much easier, which is normal. Let's say, for example, only 20% of the questions are difficult and 80% of them are easy. When you know that, then you realize that answering the easy questions correctly might even ensure you to have a passing grade. So the easy questions are the most important. Therefore, I think the best thing to do is to answer the easy questions first, because if you answer all the questions in the order, you risk getting stuck on a difficult question and then you run out of time before you finish the exam, and then you get super stressed because you're stuck on that difficult question and you feel like you can't move on. So when you consider a situation where you have completed only half of the questions and you have less than half of the total time remaining, that can be super stressful. And I'm sure it would be. And that's the kind of stress that could lead you to make a careless mistake and not read a missing word. And so that's really something that's important. So if I was going to summarize, the 3 recommendations I would make and the 3 tips I talked about, I would say that the first thing is to read the questions correctly. Second, read all the the options. And third, skip the difficult questions and answer them at the end. And after reading a question of a multiple choice options and you don't know what the correct answer is right away, it's a good idea to choose a random options and mark the question before you move on to the next one, because this way you can revisit it at the end to improve your grade. Those were my recommendations, and I would love to hear your recommendations, what your tips are when you're passing a certification if you have one. If you haven't, then the CSCA in supply chain is really good. If you've done it, tell me about your experience. I'd love to talk about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe
for more insights on supply chain management and career development. And yeah, see you in the next video.